Hi, good afternoon, and welcome. There are so many people joining us. It's fantastic to have you here. It's about 3:58 p.m., so we'll just wait a couple of moments to give people some time to join. In the meantime, why don't you let us know where you're joining us from? I would love to know where our audience is from and if you've been to a National Geographic Learning webinar before. So you can go ahead and type in the chat box. Um, I'm fr- I'm in Ho Chi Minh City, and I've been to many of these webinars before. And how about you? So let's see. Great, welcome everybody. From wait, there's Amir again. Nice to see you again. We have many people from Vietnam. Hello from Vietnam. Hello from another part of Vietnam as well. And Raphael from the Philippines, but currently living in Vietnam. That's great. I think I'm actually going to go to the Philippines this summer. So I hope the weather will be nice. I heard it's rainy season at that time. Great. So we have people from Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City. Wow, there are so many people here. And my colleague Chi will be the moderator today. So go ahead and share anything you like in the chat box. If you have questions, Chi can answer them, or she can pass them on to me if it's something that we want the whole audience to address. Okay, great. Hello, hello, hello. So we have 39 people so far, and it's about 1 minute. I wonder, have you ever joined a National Geographic Learning webinar before? I'd love to know. I think no one has said if they have before. Is this your first one, or are you kind of a webinar veteran? I'd love to know that. Okay, so Chang said, yeah, a couple of years ago. Welcome back. You know, if you're registered for this list, we can keep you in contact with you and email you about all of the upcoming webinars that we're having in the future. And Raphael says he's been here many times. So that's fantastic to hear as well. All right, so it's about 4 p.m. I'd like to go ahead and get started. If other people are coming in after 1 minute, then that's fine. They can catch up. Let me go ahead and adjust my screen a little bit. So, thank you so much for joining. And for Tan Wen, it's your first time here, so welcome. Let's say welcome to our brand new guest. I'm so excited that so many people have decided to join us. Okay, so I'm going to talk about today how exam skills are life skills, and specifically preparing students for the VSTEP exam. Okay. So at National Geographic Learning, our mission is to bring the world to the classroom and to bring the classroom to life, which I think is great for exam prep. After all, good tests purport to measure skills that are needed in the real world. So, when we bring the world to the classroom, we're not only developing our students' language skills on those topics and situations, we are indirectly preparing them for exams because they will have the real skills that are measured on the exam. Okay. So we do this because we believe you can't understand the world if you don't experience it. Language is all about using it to connect with other people and to make connections among groups. So you've got to go out there and do something with the language that you know, not just keep it in your head. So by doing things with your language, you can experience the world. And that, of course, means the whole world and the real world, not just the Anglosphere, right? English communication goes beyond the big seven so called native speaker countries, and it's a part of our students' lives outside of these countries, particularly here in Vietnam, where our students might end up in jobs where they do business speaking English with people from Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, and South Korea, not even any one of those seven countries. Okay, so today I want to talk about a few things. I'll give an example of how exam skills are applied in real life. Then I'll talk about exam preparation, specifically the VSTEP exam, and I'll explain why I'm focusing on that exam in particular. Finally, we'll take a look at some tips for exam preparation that teachers and students can apply in a variety of contexts. Just great. Just a quick reminder, if you see a link in the chat box and you don't know who it's from, do not click it. All right, thank you. Okay, so I want to talk about the real world. And in the real world, I recently became interested in this sport. Do you know what this sport is? Go ahead and type your guess in the chat box. So, in this photograph from Life Beginner 10, beginner level, Unit 10, there is an athlete wearing a protective sporting helmet, and the clear visor has been lifted up, opening one of the main vents in the helmet. Looking into the vent, we see the athlete's eyes gazing at something in the distance beyond the photographer. Okay, if you don't know the sport, here is the athlete's name. Maybe that's a clue. It's Arten Senna. I can see a lot of guesses in the chat box so far. So car racing, yes. Specifically, what kind of car racing? I'll give you one more clue. In this photo from Voices Pre-Intermediate Unit 10, we see a similar athlete who appears to be in some kind of vessel. The athlete has a protective helmet and gloves and is sitting in a position that suggests steering a vehicle. The photograph has also been artistically enhanced to show movement blur, implying a fast speed. So, do you know this sport? And yes, I see lots of correct answers in the chat box. This is indeed Formula One racing. As you can see in this photo from Voices Intermediate, with all the Formula One cars in the middle of a Grand Prix race. So, why have I brought this up? Why is this real life? Actually, many people follow sports as a hobby, and particularly they follow sports statistics. Now, I recently came across a graphic that showed the cost per point for each driver. So they get paid a certain salary every year, and they earn a certain number of points for their team every year. So the cost per point should be some kind of indicator about the driver's performance or how good they are. So let's interpret this statistic. You might think that, okay, we're talking about cost. Usually, cost is something that we want to keep low. So, what do you think? Is a high cost per point good or bad? Okay, so we can take a look at the drivers with the highest cost per point. These two drivers at the very top, if you can't see, it costs about $1.6 million per point that they earned. That's a very high cost. And these drivers only earned a small number of points. They are the two lowest ranked drivers as well. Okay, so right away, kind of we think, oh yeah, maybe high number equals bad, right? According to this formula. But wait a minute. Let's look at this middle guy. He's got the same cost per point, $1 million per point, as the guy below him, but actually he scored 10 times as many points. So I think it's not exactly, big number equals bad. You can have a big number and still be better than someone with the same number. And we can investigate this a little bit more by looking at the lowest cost per point. We have two drivers and they have relatively similar costs per point. But the driver at the bottom with 97 points, he scored less than half of the other guy. And the guy on top has a ranking that's much higher. So again, low number doesn't exactly equal good. So it's not high equals bad and low equals good. There's a little bit of nuance here. And this brings me to an exam skill that I learned many years ago when I was preparing for the SAT exam in the United States. The tip is to test mathematical formulas with multiple values to see if they remain true in all instances. Otherwise, we might make a wrong assumption. Okay, so you might be saying, Andy, how does this relate to real life? I don't care about F1 driving, right? Aside from the fact that many people spend a lot of time talking about this, and some of them even gamble on it, we can see a similar case in many jobs. Okay, so can you think of a case in professional life where people are concerned about the cost of something? I have one example here for like marketing. So people who work in marketing could rank channels by the cost per 1,000 views that they pay for in order to find out, which is the most effective at promoting their message. And again, a lot of this will depend on context. So we can see that right away in this, fake data set, by the way. According to this fake data set, Facebook gives us the most views. And even though it's the most expensive per year at $1,000, it ends up being the most cost effective at $2.08 per 1,000 views. And on the other hand, YouTube is the cheapest per year, but it's the most expensive per 1,000 views. So, does that mean Facebook good, YouTube bad? Of course not, right? We need to take many other things into consideration. For example, in this context, YouTube has the most flexible and easy to use tools for providing automatic captions, which is something that a subset of our audience needs. So just because it's more expensive, it doesn't mean it's bad, right? And this goes back to our exam tip. Test mathematical formulas with multiple values to see if they remain true in all instances. And additionally, we might even need to bring in other values that represent the context. So, the value that we get from adding subtitles automatically to our videos. So, that's just one example of how we are using exam tips. This is something that I studied in an exam preparation book, and it has real life applications, not only to my hobby, but also to real professional work. And actually, the specific exam tip I learned was to test formulas with the values of -1, 0, and 1 because they're special, right? If you multiply by 1, it stays the same. Divide by 0, and suddenly it's undefined. Or if you multiply by -1, now it's the opposite. Okay, so -1, 0, and 1. Keep that in mind for later because right now I'm talking about math skills, but I'm going to show you how this is related to language skills, right? So we're all language teachers. Let's talk about language exams. First of all, why the VSTEP exam? VSTEP is a locally developed and produced language proficiency assessment that satisfies the needs of many students. So, exams like the IELTS and TOEFL are often required for going abroad, but they also have some limitations on their validity. So, for students who have no plan to go abroad or who aren't going abroad in less than 2 years, the VSTEP might be an appealing option for them. Additionally, you might have heard that the VSTEP exam can be used to satisfy the high school graduation requirement for foreign language proficiency. And on top of that, for a few years, some universities have been accepting VSTEP scores both for admission and for meeting the foreign language requirement. So, again, this is something that is appealing to many students. And finally, VSTEP is also a bit more affordable. So we see the registration fee is 1.8 million Vietnam dong. And just go ahead in your free time and search for the registration fee for the IELTS exam or for the TOEFL internet-based test. I'm pretty sure that you will find a significant difference. So if you're a student, a university student, and you just need to prove your English proficiency in Vietnam for one purpose, it makes sense to take the local, cheaper exam. So basically, there is now a wide audience for this local proficiency exam, and we want to help them achieve their best. So let's briefly consider how exams are written and structured. Okay, first of all, if you've ever seen an exam prep book, do you think that they are quite small or quite large? What do you think? Let me know in the chat box. what you think. Okay. Are these exam prep books, small in content, or do they have quite a lot of content? Yes, right. They have so much content. People literally spend hundreds of hours working through them. So, of course, we only have 1 hour today. So, there's no way that I'm going to be able to tell you everything about VSTEP, but I can give you a starting place. Another thing to keep in mind is that exams have a mix of content and application. So, yes, we do need to know in our long term memory a lot of knowledge about the English language, including grammar, vocabulary, phonics, pronunciation, and usage. And no matter how many exam skills and tips and tricks that you have, it's incredibly unlikely that those tips will take an A2 student and return a score of C1. There's really a limit to how much exam skills can help. Okay, so for example, in this IELTS speaking task 1, you need to know not only the vocabulary to answer these questions, but you also need to know a range of vocabulary because we can't predict exactly which questions will come up. So, in my view, extensive reading and listening are very helpful here, as well as overt studying and memorization of vocabulary words. Committing them to memory will make it easier for students to retrieve them when it comes time to apply them in conversation. So, in conclusion, the exam tips that I give here will make the exam easier, I hope, for someone who has the existing content knowledge, or the tips can help them make educated guesses rather than random guesses. So, just a caveat, you are not going to get the highest score ever just from watching my 1 hour webinar. I wish that that was, the opposite, but that's the world that we live in, right? Okay, so let's look at reading exams, shall we? Right. On the VSTEP exam, we can see, according to their format, that the test claims to assess reading proficiency from levels 3 to 5, and especially to test the candidate's ability to understand vocabulary in context and to make inferences. So let's take a look at one of these sample questions. I got this from Vietnam National University's website, and there's a link on this slide. But also, if you Google VSTEP format, you will find this page. On that page, they have a sample test with the answer key. So that's a good place for you to start. Now, this reading text talks about a person who is an agent, that's their job, and this agent describes the work that they do with famous or rich clients. So let's look at the question, okay? The word circle in line 21 could best be replaced by which word, okay? So I need to figure out which word is the closest in meaning to the text. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the text. In the text, I see line 21. Well, first of all, I find the keyword and then I want to go back to the beginning of the sentence. Let me see if I can get a pen. No. Okay, so at a black tie gala at the White House, two clients hated the dinner and insisted that we circle around Washington, D.C. to find a YFC open at 1 a.m. I had to go in wearing a gown and order so they could eat it in the car. All right. So I think we probably have some guesses here. And one exam tip that I can give you is to predict the answer first and then go double check among the options for the closest fit. So let's think logically here. Okay. So they circle around. Okay. From context, we know that this is a verb, right? From its place in the sentence. So they are doing something. They do something around Washington, do something around the city. So that signals movement to me. And in the next sentence, we see that they are in a car. Okay, so personally, I think circle means let's drive around or they're going to drive around, but let's check. So We have some conflicting opinions, right? So A and D, walk or ride. That is a good point. All right. So yes, drive is one of the answers, but the question the question asks for the best option. Okay, so yes, you're right. A and D could both be correct. In fact, all of these words fit grammatically, but there's only one correct answer. So let's cheat. Let's see. We have movement, and let's check just contextually. So look around. Yes, we can look around, but look around doesn't really involve moving. So I'm going to eliminate that answer. And walk around, okay, again, like you can walk around a city, but it does mention that they're in a car. So right away, I think look and walk are things that we can eliminate. It does come down to, is it drive or ride? So technically, it might be ride around. Okay. Technically, if you are not the driver, then you do not drive a car. Okay, so uh, most people, though, I know they say that they drive even if they are not the driver. So I would say, I'm going on a road trip with my family and we're going to drive to another city. Even, okay, I'm not the driver, I'm just sitting in the car. But generally, that's what people say. We are going to drive to another city. And furthermore, I think we can contrast this by collocation. So usually we say ride a motorbike and drive a car, but we never say ride a car. We can say ride in a car, but not ride a car. So the collocation here is going to show that ride is a distractor. Okay. Drive is really the closest fit because it mentions a car and not a bike. So that's one way that we can infer and guess the meaning from context. Okay, so there's an application of the exam skill. Now let's think: do we ever do this in the real world? And for me, the answer is yes. Okay, so I'll give you one example. I follow this Facebook page about rowing in Italy, and Italian is a foreign language to me that I enjoy studying and reading. So I've translated the message for you here on the slide, and I picked out a word that is really unfamiliar to me. Okay. So this describes their medals as heavy, right? These athletes at a competition won 4 medals. And it says that their medals are heavy. Okay, so I this word pesanti is strange to me, or heavy. I don't really know what it means. So they won 4 kinds of medals. What kinds of medals did they win? Or can you guess why they described these medals as heavy? Okay? Obviously it's not literal because look at the picture. They're holding the medals up with one finger, right? So they can't literally be heavy. Let's infer from context what they might possibly mean by calling these heavy metals. So you can think a moment and type in the chat box, what do they mean by heavy? I wonder what you have to say. What do they mean by heavy in this context? All right. So we have, oh, great. We have a lot of good guesses. So it might mean great in this context because it's talking about their achievement and how they did well. So that's a really great guess. Another guess is something in great significance, and gold or something like that, or there's 2 of them, right? So I think, yeah, I think we're on the right track. It's worth many things, right? My guess was that by heavy there they mean that they won a lot of them. This team together won 4 medals. So, 1 medal is easy to carry, but 4 medals, that might be a little bit kind of heavy. So that's a really good example of how we can guess and infer meaning from context. Now, I know what you're going to say, Andy, I do not follow Italian rowing teams on Facebook. How does this apply to me and my students? And it actually applies to many, many jobs, I think. I'm sure you can think of an example in your work where you've encountered some word or some phrase that you are not really sure about. So, as part of my job, I have to read a lot of research about language teaching, language science, and linguistics. And in this paper that I recently started reading, I came across a new concept called the socio-cognitive model of task design. Okay, so I've heard of socio-cognitive things before, but never in this topic of language assessment. So I have to guess or find out the meaning from context. Okay, so let's take a moment to think. Can you guess from context what is the socio-cognitive model of task design? I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, and you can see I've highlighted some other words there that might help you. But take a moment to think about what you know about the words socio or social and cognitive, which has to do with the mind or thinking. Can you take a guess? What do you think is the socio-cognitive model of task design? Or what do you think it concerns? What are some topics that they deal with in this area of socio-cognitive models of task design? Okay, so this might be a little bit difficult, right? So, but we do have some guesses here. So a test can be authentic and socially adapting. I like that because we're taking our knowledge of that word social and saying, okay, there's something about adapting it to the social context. And of course, yes, lo and behold, later in the paragraph the authors provide context clues like contextual features like word count, topic, level of abstractness to the text, as well as the highest level of cognitive processing. Okay. So basically, this what we can gather from reading this and inferring is that this socio-cognitive model of task design takes into account social factors as well as the process of thinking and how thinking and what effect does the process of thinking have on our ability to complete the test. So there we go. The exam skill that I mentioned is definitely something that is applicable to real life, and it's something that I use quite frequently in my job. And I'm sure that you probably also use this skill in your life. That's why I say exam skills are life skills. So, how do we then practice these? I think a good course book, of course, reflects real life. And if it reflects real life, it should have real skills. So, like this opportunity of practicing inferring in a reading task. We don't always need a special exam prep book to practice exam skills. Uh, Books that reflect the real world have real skills in them. So students here have the opportunity to practice this skill of inferring meaning. Now, it's all great and well if we can practice this in class, but repeated practice is really what's most effective. So I want to think about how I can give my students practice with this outside of class. So, when would students have to infer or guess from context? I need to think of some sources to give my students where they will likely encounter some unfamiliar words or figurative language or metaphors or simile or synonymy, synonyms. Can you think of any of these sources? I'd like to hear your thoughts. You can share them in the chat box. Where in real life would students encounter these things? Figurative language, metaphor, simile, synonymy, and unfamiliar words. So let's see how many different sources that we can get here. Okay, comedies, exactly. Yeah, right. That comedies especially will have figurative language or metaphor. Newspaper and literature will definitely have simile, metaphor, figurative language. Newspapers, depending on the topic, will have some unfamiliar words. Research papers definitely are likely to have unfamiliar words. Films, adverts, poems, novels, sitcoms, TV shows, magazines, jokes, essays, movies, right? So, as you can see, we have so many authentic sources for students to encounter the need to infer or guess the meaning from context. So, one thing I like to do is assign independent reading tasks from these sources. Okay, so I'm going to encourage students to do a very close reading and pay attention to the words that they don't know and write them down in a rhetorical journal. A rhetorical journal is a place in a notebook where you can write down words and phrases either that you like or you like the expression of or you want to know what they mean. Um, and they help our students commit these language points to memory. Right. So I did this in my 11th grade literature class. And personally, I loved having a big reference section at the beginning of my notebook with tons of different examples of ways to introduce arguments or interesting ways of describing an appearance of something that's not just it is big. Okay. So, really encouraging our students to engage with these texts outside of class time on their own is going to be the an effective way, I think, to build up their content knowledge when it comes to building vocabulary and grammar range. Okay, so that's a super quick overview of reading. Let's talk about listening. Okay, again, the VSTEP test purports to assess listening proficiency from levels 3 to 5, and especially to test the candidate's ability to listen for details and listen for gist and make inferences. I'm going to focus on listening for details today. Okay, so I know that for listening, I have to keep track of a lot of information. And why do you think that is? So, if you're familiar with standardized language exams, do you often get to hear the track one time or more than one time? What do you think? Are these students going to hear the recording one time or more than one time? Twice. One. Okay, so yeah, it really depends on the exam, but I looked up on the VSTEP exam, it's saying they only get to hear it once. So it means that I need to help my students keep track of quite a lot of information, which means listening for details and the key points and putting them together. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is highlight some of the key words and concepts that I'll be listening for. So let's look at the question. What does the speaker mean by mentioning more rights? Okay. What do you think is the key word here? The key words that we should be listening for? For me, I think it's more rights. Okay, so that's great. I've identified the key words here in the question, but this is going to be a whole conversation. Right? So I definitely need to think of more words that I'm going to listen to. So I'm going to, of course, identify some more keywords from each answer option. So maybe in option A, we'll be talking about who and what are they doing? Islanders having more freedom to do business. And in option B, Ecuadorians visiting the island. In option C, tourists and having more freedom. And in option D, visitors being encouraged to visit the island. Okay, so let's find it. What does the speaker mean by mentioning more rights? So I'm going to read this transcript out loud. I apologize. I'm gonna have to do both voices. I'm not a voice actor, so you'll just have to imagine it's two different people. But I'd like you to listen to this conversation and choose the correct answer. Okay, so we have two people, a person who's a tourist, and then Felipe. All right, Emma is a tourist, and Felipe is a local person from Ecuador. Okay, so Emma says, Felipe, have you been to the Galapagos Islands? No, but you live in Ecuador. Yes, well, the problem is that traveling to the Galapagos is really expensive for us. What do you mean for us? Is it expensive for Ecuadorians? Yes, for Ecuadorian nationals, people who live in Ecuador, because, since the Galapagos attracts so many tourists each day, hotels and food and travel are so costly. So, we cannot travel there because we cannot afford it. But tourists, international tourists, that is, they can afford to go. That's weird. I had the idea that Galapagos was part of Ecuador, so Ecuadorians would go there a lot. So then who does go to the Galapagos? Oh, I lost my place in the transcript. Well, maybe 1 out of 10 Ecuadorians go there. But why do you think it's so expensive? Well, because as I've just mentioned, thousands of tourists go there, and the islands can't support many tourists every day. Let's suppose that if prices were really low, more and more people would go there, and there might be environmental problems and pollution, those kinds of issues. So, people in the Galapagos, their strategy has been to raise prices so that fewer people will go there and the impact on the environment is lower. I suppose that's true, but being from Ecuador and not being able to see part of your own country, I wonder how that can be solved. Well, I don't really know, but we have other options, such as traveling to the Amazon region, which is as beautiful as the Galapagos. Maybe the government should do something because we want to travel to the Galapagos, but we can't. It's quite sad. I think it is sad. I believe that Ecuadorians should have more rights than the tourists who go to Galapagos. Yep, we should have more rights, but sadly, we don't. Okay. So thanks for putting up with my two-person dual personalities. So what do we think? Ecuadorians should visit the island with more. Sorry, what did they mean by mentioning more rights? And everybody is saying B, which is yes, that's the correct answer. Again, if we just listen for more rights, we're going to miss the key information because there's all that information about islanders and Ecuadorians and tourists. We need to hone in specifically um, to talk about the Ecuadorians and going there with more ease, which also could, as Mario says, making it more affordable to the locals, right? Great. So, what exam skill have we used here? This is an exam skill with a real life application. One place where you have to keep track of a lot of information from start to finish is an instructional video or a recipe. So sometimes I'll look up how to do something in some software, and it's quite a complicated process. I have to remember quite a lot of that. Fortunately, it's a video I do have the luxury of pausing, but I still need to keep track of that information so I know, oh, I missed this one part. I know where I need to go back and find the information. And if you are not wanting to know how to make GIFs in Photoshop, something more widely appealing to a lot of different students Might be to look up some recipes and what do you need, what steps do you do, and which order. So we could ask our students to listen or watch and take notes on the steps that they need to complete. This helps them keep track of information while they are listening. And then, as a follow up task, they could describe this task to another person, or they could make their own instructional video. There's quite a lot of options for teachers there. Of course, we do need to practice that in class with the guidance of the teacher. And look, yes, of course, the Voices course book provides this opportunity because understanding key points in succession is a real skill that I've just demonstrated. Okay, so in this task, the students get lots of practice understanding the key points. So maybe skipping out on some of the less important words, but still listening for islanders, Ecuadorians, and tourists. Okay. So again, it's something that we can do on an exam. It's something we can do in real life. And it's something that we can practice with students in class using a course book. All right. So let's say we want to give our students even more practice. Where are they likely to listen to people talk for a long time, especially where people make reference to things mentioned earlier? So, just like we thought about like comedies and films and things, what other sources can we give to students where they're going to have to listen for a long time, especially to keep track of information over a long period of time? Can you think of any sources like that? Go ahead and share with me your ideas in the chat box. All right. So I think there's lots of great ideas. So lectures, interviews, TV shows, debates, presentations, exactly. Some other ideas are instructional videos, history lectures, video essays, talk shows, podcasts, news broadcasts, or even a meeting in work, a political campaign. Exactly. Right. So, fantastic. So that's again another super brief overview of a listening exam skill. I want to talk now about multiple choice questions. All right. So, this is always a hot topic because multiple choice questions in good test design can measure that you know an answer is correct, and they also show that you know the other answers are not correct. Okay. Test developers do a lot of work to make sure that there is only one correct answer because otherwise the test isn't fair. If you can answer a question with two correct answers, that's not a fair test, unless it says choose one or two of the correct answers. Anyway, let's take a look at how we can interpret this. So we need to keep in mind the difference between these two prompts: choose the correct answer and choose the best answer. So in our reading test earlier, there was the best answer question, right? Walk around the city is possible answer. Look around the city is grammatically possible, but not semantically possible. Ride around the city is also grammatically and semantically possible, but drive around the city is the best answer because they mention a car. So let's take a look at some of this. It's going to bring me back to what I was talking about. So if you're wondering, Andy, why were you talking about math at the beginning? It's because of this exam skill that I learned something like 20 years ago, testing the formula with multiple values, especially 1, 0, and -1, which is essentially the same thing as true, false, and not given. Or as I like to call it, same, opposite, or different. Okay, so again, when you multiply a number by 1, it stays the same. When you multiply by -1, it becomes opposite. So 5 and -5 are opposites. But if you multiply it by 0, it becomes 0. That's neither the same nor the opposite. It's just different. So 1, 0, -1, true, false, not given, same, opposite, different. This informs so much of how many tests are written. So let's look at this question here. The question comes from an article about um, renters, so college graduates who've just finished university and they go to find their first apartment and they're shocked at how much it costs. Okay, so this question says, which of the following would best describe the attitudes of renters who decide to raise the price limit after being informed of the price? Okay, so oops, sorry, wrong one. Um, Okay, so let's look at the options. So, first of all, I need to think about grudgingly. That's telling us how they decide. So, what does grudgingly mean? Grudgingly means like if you do something grudgingly, you don't really want to, but you have to, but you don't want to. So it's kind of like unwilling is the dictionary definition. So if we know it's unwilling right away, we can see that A is the opposite. So we can eliminate that. B, hopeful. Okay, that's not. Is it the synonym or is it different? So it's not a synonym. It's not opposite. It's just different. We can eliminate that choice. Now, that leaves us with two choices, reluctant or frustrated. Now, I think that reluctant is the same as unwilling. It kind of means that you don't want to do it. But there's also frustrated, which is kind of similar. So I need to choose the best one. Frustrated means annoyed or angry if you can't do something. So again, annoyed or angry, do we think that's the same, opposite, or different from unwilling? So what do you think? Same, opposite, or different? Frustrated and unwilling. Are they same, opposite, or different? I think that these are quite just different, right? They're neither the same nor opposites. These are different. So that means I can eliminate it. The answer must be C. And in fact, I checked the answer key and that is correct. Okay. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of some of our students. Let's say we don't know what grudgingly means. That's a realistic situation for our students. So we need to then guess from context. Okay, so they grudgingly decide to raise the price limit. That means they decide to pay more. Do you think that sounds good or bad? So if you could let me know in the chat box, grudgingly. If you don't know the word grudgingly, let's replace it by schmershally and we schmushily decide to pay more. Does that sound good or bad, right? It sounds bad. We have some negative connotations. Okay, so right away, then we can eliminate the first two options, willing and hopeful, because those have quite positive connotations. And then again, uh, right, we are back to reluctant and frustrated. So in this specific instance, usually, a true, false, not given question provides an answer with synonymy. So, not the exact same word, but a word that is nearly the same in meaning. And because frustrating is in this text, when expectations are high, the process can be very frustrating. I think that we can identify that as a distractor. Okay, because a multiple choice test, true, false, not given, will want to focus on synonymy. It's not testing scan reading abilities and your ability to match words. It's testing your ability to understand uh, words in context with similar meaning. So we can identify that frustrated is the distractor here. Okay, so great. That brings us down to reluctant. Okay. And even if we don't identify that there is a distractor, we still have a 50-50 chance of getting the answer correct just by knowing that from context, that the meaning has a negative connotation. Okay, so that's what I meant earlier about it can help us make educated guesses. These skills won't and strategies won't always lead us to the correct answer, but it can give us the ability to make an educated guess. Okay, and let's practice this together as a group. So we can make several tasks like this using book content. Okay, so in this excerpt from the Voices course book, let's look at the last sentence. It says, he wears swimming shorts and blah, blah, blah. At the end, he always wears plastic shoes to protect his feet from glass and old bicycles. Okay, he always wears plastic shoes to protect his feet from glass and old bicycles. So I want to turn this into a question. Why does he wear special shoes? And let's practice going through this task design of making a same, opposite, and different answer options for our students. So let's just start off with the correct answer, protect. Can you tell me another phrase, right? He wears his shoes the shoes to protect his feet. Can you tell me another phrase that means nearly the same as protect his feet? So what phrases or words mean similar to protect his feet? And you can be as creative as you want here. So which ones are going to mean protect his feet? Oh, right. Sorry. I'm not sending it to everyone. Let me send this question to everyone. What words or phrases mean protect his feet? Right. So keep his feet from being hurt, keeping his feet safe. Those are really good answer options. Keep his feet secure. All right. Guard off his feet. Fantastic. Okay. Now let's go to the opposite answer option. So can you tell me a phrase or a sentence that means the opposite of protecting his feet? Okay, so keep his feet from injury. That's nearly the same as protect. We need to find an answer option that means the opposite of protect. Okay, to hurt his feet, to avoid getting hurt. I think that's nearly the same. So that would be a good answer option for synonymy. But how about antonymy? Uh, the opposite meaning of getting hurt. Okay, so prevent injury. These are all things that mean nearly the same as protect. I need the opposite. So injure his feet, right? Great. His feet gets exposed to harmful things. Fantastic. All right, so it's very easy for us to come up with these answer options to give our students. And now the different option. Okay, so can we think of any phrase or reason that means to wear shoes, but not for protection or getting hurt? And I like this answer here, to wash his sandals. Maybe he wears special shoes to wash his sandals. That's semantically possible, but not the correct answer according to the text. Okay. I wonder if anyone has any other options, another reason to wear special shoes that is not about protecting or not about injuring. Exactly, right? So to make him look more fashionable. So there we go. We can take a text directly from the course book and give our students practice with these kind of multiple choice question setups. And by teaching them to identify the similar meaning, the opposite meaning, and not given meaning or a different meaning is one way to help them sort through the answer options when it's asking for what is the best answer. Okay, especially when multiple answers are semantically possible or grammatically possible. This can help us identify the best option. All right. In addition to that, so I've talked about using the course book to help prepare for exams and giving students independent tasks to help them practice those skills that they use on the exam. We, of course, have another way. We can help you with success on the VSTEP exam, and that's through practice tests. The Voices course book comes with several practice tests in the VSTEP format, and, personally, in my opinion, just doing a practice test was very likely to increase my score. Back when I had to take standardized exams in high school, I took many, many practice tests, and each time my score would go up or be, similar, and never really went down. So, doing practice tests is also another way to support our students. If you are using the Voices course book, this is something that we can provide you with. And it's two practice tests aimed at the VSTEP 2 level. So I believe that is the A2. It's about A2 equivalency on the CEFR. So VSTEP 2, I think, is A2 CEFR level. And for VSTEP levels 3 through 5, we offer 4 additional practice tests. So there you go. You have many different ways to prepare your students for the VSTEP exam. And I'll just review those quickly again. So, number one, do these practice tests that are available to people who use the Voices coursebook. You can also do the practice tests, the practice tasks in class using the carefully selected tasks in the course book. They are written that way because they reflect skills that are used in the real world. And good tests measure skills that are used on the real world. And finally, you can give your students independent work to find sources where they're going to need to apply some of these reading and listening skills. So I hope that these skills are useful to you as you and your students race towards success. So I'd like to see if you have any questions so far. Okay, so let's see. So where can we access the sample tests? If you are using the Voices course book, we have them in a place for you. I need to find that out. How could we get this test? So, if are you using the Voices course book currently in your class? That is question number one. Um, Yeah. So if you are using the Voices coursebook, then we can provide you with the V-step practice tests. Okay, so if you're not currently using that, that's something maybe you want to think about. Um, but again, you don't have to use these practice tests. First of all, on the Vietnam National University website, there is one practice test available for free. And you've seen some of the questions that I've gone through in this webinar. So you can get one practice test there for free. And if you need a little bit more practice, then don't worry, I've given you all those other options. Try to find examples in real life of where you're using these exam skills. And they're literally everywhere, from looking about statistics about drivers to reading a paper. Okay, so uh, you just got to be creative and find where these exam skills are used in real life. In real life, personally, I like to go and look at a question and break it down. So I might look at this one and say, what's the skill that I used me personally? I'm a teacher. I'm a higher level than my students. What skill did I use, and then I can think about how I use that skill in my real life. And then I can give my students a task using a similar skill or find out where that skill is appearing in a regular course book activity, like a reading comprehension activity or a critical thinking activity. So a question here, can I buy the practice tests separately? No, it's a package deal. So they just come with people who are using the course book, the Voices course book. And can you share with us some trusted, so in the Q&A, can you share with us some trusted resources to practice reading and listening for VSTEP? Sure. So, one again, you can go on the Vietnam National University website to find their practice test. Sorry, let me just find that. And that is free. That will help you see what to do. I can't find it. Sorry. Here we go. This is the website, vstep.vnu.edu.vn, and that will lead you to the practice test. Again, I think reading and listening, that's something that you can assign your students. I hope that I've given you some ideas about how you can give them tasks and sources where they practice the skills outside of class. And of course, many of the course books from National Geographic Learning, such as Voices, include the same kinds of skills that students will need to use on the exam. So as far as I know, there isn't any one V-step preparation book that has been written. If you do know, feel free to share. So in the absence of that, there are so many books about how to master the IELTS or how to prepare for IELTS. As far as I know, there isn't one book like that for the V-step. So in the meantime, it's up to us as teachers to identify the skills that are on the exam and give our students practice with those skills, both in class and outside of class. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you. All right, so it's about 5 p.m. right now. Thank you so much for joining me. I really had a great time discussing exam skills with you. It's something that I'm very interested in. And I'll just give you one closing note. Uh, if you become a fan, follow us on Facebook. You'll hear more about the events that we are holding. So we may do more webinars on the VSTEP exam. We're also having several events this summer. So follow us on Facebook to keep in touch and to find out about how to register to attend those events. That's facebook.com/nglearningvn. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening. Thanks and goodbye.